Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Very happy to have you here. And we're very happy to have today's guest, Kathie Giorgio, joining us to provide some insight into fiction writing and a workshop for us to all participate in. We'll come back in just a second. We just have a very short 1-minute video to share with you, and then I'll come back and introduce Kathie a little bit more, and we'll get things underway. So thanks again for joining us, and I'll be right back.
Welcome to the 2020 Central Wisconsin Book Festival. This week of amazing events is possible only because of the support of our sponsors, which include
Marathon County Public Library,
the Friends of the Marathon County Public Library,
the MCPL Foundation,
the Community Arts Grant Program
of the Community Foundation of North Central Wisconsin,
with funds provided by the Wisconsin Arts Board, which is a state agency,
the Community Foundation,
and the B.A. and Esther Greenheck Foundation,
the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service,
the Merco Foundation Fund,
Wisconsin Public Radio,
the Master Gardener Program of Marathon County,
North Central Area Congregations Organized to Make an Impact,
or Naomi,
and Yankee Bookstore.
Thank you to all of our friends and partners who make the Wisconsin Book Festival possible.
And we thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right, and thank you all for joining us. Our guest today to lead our workshop, Kathie Giorgio, who has close to a dozen titles to her name, including novels, essay and story collections, and poetry. Her full-length poetry book, No Matter Which Way You Look, There Is More to See, was just published this month, and Kathie will be joining us tomorrow to read some selections from that book at 11 a.m. tomorrow morning. So you're welcome to join us again for that as well. Happy to have her coming back tomorrow, and happy to have her leading things today. Just a quick note, so we have everybody muted, and you have the option to turn your camera on or off if you'd like. If you'd rather not, you can turn it off. You can do all of that at the bottom of the screen. We do have, if you'll notice at the bottom of your screen, there's a little button that says chat. You can submit questions via chat. I think because we're just a little over of what could be considered a small group, I think we'll handle questions for Kathie through the chat feature. So if you have a question, either something that she just said that you need an answer to, or perhaps maybe a more general question that could maybe wait until later, just type it into the chat and we will pass it along to Kathie. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Kathie. Thanks again for joining us today.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me. So welcome to everybody here. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about who I am and what All Writers is, and then we'll get into today's topic. I would ask, if you are comfortable with having your cameras on, if you would turn them on. There's going to be a couple times that I may be asking you a question where I would like you to raise your hand in answer, and I can't see your hand if I can't see your face. Plus, it is also very nice for me to be able to see faces while I am teaching. That way I get a sense of, am I getting across? You know, do I need to straighten something out? That would help me a lot too. So feel free to let me see your faces. I am seeing some familiar faces here today, and I'm so glad you joined me. This is a new experience for all of us, I think, learning to do this kind of event online and through Zoom. So we'll be learning how to do this together. I've presented to lots of groups. I've never presented to a group like this for a festival before. You guys are the first time I am presenting to this way. So feel lucky that you get me for the first time, and we'll see how it goes. In terms of who I am Kathie Giorgio. Chad said that I have almost a dozen books. This is true. My book that was just released this week was my 11th. I have 5 novels, 2 short story collections, 2 poetry chapbooks, a book of essays, and now the full-length poetry book. So I pretty much cover the gamut. We've been calling this a fiction workshop, but I really intend this to be for all writers. Whether you are writing poetry or nonfiction, you will be able to use the material from today's presentation to help you out. I've been writing forever. I started writing before I knew that I was writing. I'm told, and I vaguely remember, that I'm going to really age myself here. I used to use carbon paper to trace the pictures out of my picture books and then rewrite the stories the way I felt they should be written. So I've done it forever. I published for the first time at 15 and I just kept on going. It's something that I love. Writing. I don't even like saying that writing is my passion. It's more than that. It's my life. You know, I am surrounded with writers all of the time. If I'm not writing, I'm teaching. If I'm not teaching, I'm editing. If I'm not editing, I'm advocating for writers. So writing is everything to me. I am the director of All Writers Workplace and Workshop, which is an international creative writing studio located in Waukesha, Wisconsin. We will be 16 years old as of January. We offer online and, when we don't have COVID, on-site classes and workshops in creative writing for all genres and abilities. That's why it's called All Writers. Our on-site classes currently are all online, so even if you wanted to come here, if you were in an area where you could come and join in on the live classes, you can still do so. We're just Zooming it for now. All Writers is a community. I wanted it to be a place where any writer would feel comfortable coming to, whether they were putting their first words down on the page or whether they have multiple books out. It's a place where you can receive encouragement and education and just feel at home. And so that's what we are all about. So today, what we're talking about, I called this When the Going Gets Tough. And I wanted to be talking about how do we stay motivated to keep on writing, to keep on going through everyday stuff, but also building up to what we are currently going through. I cannot tell you the number of students I've had who have told me they are having issues writing because of dealing with the pandemic and the election and the protests and the fires in California and the hurricanes in Louisiana. It seems like we are really under fire right now, and writers are particularly sensitive people. And we sense this stuff going on around us, and it makes it very hard for us to sit down and start writing. But I want to talk first about what is it like just to sit down and write every day. And I would hope that all of you agree with me that writing is not an easy thing. I think that the general public has this image of writers that we come into our garret and we sit down at the computer, and from nowhere, this muse comes and hits us and lights up our minds, and we just start typing like fiends and it all comes out. No, it doesn't happen that way. It's a lot of work. And again, I have 23 years of teaching behind me, and I can tell you that almost every single student at one point has said to me, my God, this is a lot of work. They weren't expecting that, and it is work, at least if you want to do it well. So first, I want you to tell me, you'll have to do it by raising your hands, if any of you has done this, where you work really hard to eke out a little part of your day to be able to sit down and write, and you get everything done that you're supposed to, and you sit down at your keyboard and you think, I really should put in a load of laundry. I wonder what's in the mail. I wonder if what's in my email. Maybe there's an acceptance there. I should be looking in my email. I should look at Facebook. I wonder what the other writers are doing. Maybe they've had some successes that I could take advantage of. Was that the dog barking? What is the dog barking about? Have you done that? Raise your hands if you've done that. Yep. It's so common. And I'm finding it that it is common not even just in writers, but across the board in the arts. I had a mom who was a visual artist, and she told me she did the same thing. She would work really hard to get everything done in her day. She'd go to sit down at her easel, and suddenly she would find something else to do. It is so hard to just get started. So what can we do to make it that we can do this? You know, and I could tell you again that the number one excuse that I get from students as to why did they not produce pages this week is, I ran out of time. Well, part of the reason we run out of time is because we sit down at our computer and we find every other reason to do something else than write. So how can we make it so that we will sit down and start writing and we won't let ourselves be distracted by other things? The first thing is we really need to start taking ourselves seriously. A lot of the writers that I know will say that they write as a hobby or they write as a pastime. They don't consider it a choice. They don't consider it a job. They don't consider it a passion or a career. So the first thing we need to do is start taking ourselves seriously. And when somebody says to you, so what are you working on right now? You don't say, well, I'm just kind of noodling around with a short story, you know, nothing big. We start saying what we're doing. We're writing. We're sitting down and we are spending time writing every day, and it's an important thing. I think it's important that most people know that the majority of writers out there who call themselves full-time writers do not write for 8 hours a day. The majority of us have other jobs. I consider myself a full-time writer. I've produced 11 books since 2011. However, I also teach 85 hours a week. How can I possibly be a full-time writer if you consider full-time 40 hours a week if I'm also teaching 85 hours a week? It's just not physically possible. But I am a writer, and I will always say that first. If anybody asks me what I do, writing comes first. So to take yourself seriously as a writer, you need a space to be a writer. Where do you write? Do you just sit down at the kitchen table? Do you sit in your recliner? Do you write here, there, and everywhere? One of the easiest tricks to get more work done and to be more focused is to have a specific spot for your writing. And it doesn't have to be an office. You know, there's a lot of writers I know out there, especially women, who are building she sheds, which are just for their writing. You don't have to go so far as to go in your backyard and add a building. Find a place in your house. I know you might already be saying, but I don't have room. I have no room anywhere. Yeah, you do. You just have to kind of think outside of the box and figure, where is there a corner that I can set my laptop and I can make it my own. And I'm going to surround it, this little space, with things that help me to write. Are there certain photographs? Are there phrases that you can put next to your computer? Is there anything you can do that will help your mind focus? One of the things that we need to learn, even from something as simple as Pavlov's dogs, is we have trainable minds. If you have a spot that is only for writing, your mind is going to click on to writing as soon as you sit in that space, because that's what it's for. It's for writing. I wanted to show you, this is, if you don't have this book, you need to get it, because I use it so often and it is just the most amazing thing. This is called The Writer's Desk, and it is by Jill Krementz, Krementz. Jill Krementz was the wife of Kurt Vonnegut, and she was also a photographer. And so this entire book is filled with pictures of writers and their desks, or wherever they write, because one of the things I'm going to show you in here is they don't always write at a desk. So that's what I'm talking about with thinking outside of the box. You know, where can you have your own space? I'll show you one that you automatically, you will know this guy because everybody thinks of him when they think of writers. Here's Stephen King. This is what his office looks like, which is a mess. But he likes that, you know, and again, it's his space. There is no other space in the house, he says, that is his. Place he can do whatever he wants. There's even a dog there for those of you who like dogs. So this is more about a traditional place, having an office to sit in, but make it your own. There's also, I wanted to show you Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison wrote every morning on her couch, in her bathrobe. She said this particular spot of the couch was only used for writing. So she would never show up later in the day and sit in the middle or sit on the far side. She would sit here for writing. And she would do it as soon as she got out of bed. And notice she's doing it on paper. She was great still for writing in paper before she would go to the computer. So you don't have to be thinking of a desk. You have a spot on your couch that you can claim as your own. As an exact opposite of Stephen King, this is E.B. White, Charlotte's Web. Very, very sparse, very clean, and yet he has this amazing window that overlooks the water, so he could always look out there if he needed some inspiration. But he needed neatness and quiet to write. So that's another thing for you to consider. What do you need in your environment to help you get some writing done? And then surround yourself with that. This one is Kathleen Shine. She writes in bed. Now, granted, she also sleeps here. So she does have a double purpose, but she has a special little desk that is right next to her bed that is only used for writing. So, and she also says it's a great place to take naps, which I think would possibly be a danger for me. If I climbed into bed to write, I'd probably be asleep in about 5 minutes, but she used it, and this is how she made her space. This one I thought was interesting. This is Isaac Bashevis Singer. And the thing I love about this is he has this huge, gigantic desk. And where does he write? On the narrow end of it. For some reason, he wanted all that space, but he wanted it spread out long in front of him instead of being in the middle of the big part and having it to his left and right. And then finally, I think that's the last one I had to, nope, I had one more to show you. For those of you who say you don't have space, this is Veronica Chambers, and she writes sitting on her kitchen counter with her laptop in her lap. And again, you can see there's nothing else on that counter. That's all it's used for, is for her to sit there and write. So I want you to take a few minutes just to jot down a few ideas in whatever you have to write about where in your home could you find a place to write. Just give yourself some ideas. I'm gonna give you like 2 minutes to do that. See if you can write down some suggestions as to where you could set up a space to write. And raise your hands when you're done so I know you're ready. I see 3 are done, 4 are done, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I suppose I should see how many of you I have. 9, 10. And a couple of you don't have your cameras on. So I'll just assume you're getting done. All right, excellent. So now you have found a place where you can set up a writing spot. And that is your first step toward taking writing seriously. You have given yourself your own place to sit down and work. Next thing we're going to talk about is rituals. Every writer I've ever known has a ritual when they sit down to write. Some people will have like little talismans on their desk, and they have to touch each one before they start. Some of them will have to play solitaire. That's one I am always very cautious about, especially my folks who say, I'm going to play solitaire before I write, but I have to win first. Well, you could be playing 20 games before you win. So let's just say I'm going to play 1 game of solitaire. Come up with something that really helps you to get into the mood. For me, what I have always used when I'm writing something bigger, not so much with my short stories, but when I'm working on a book, I assign every book a song. so that every day when I sit down to write, I listen to that song first. My first novel was The Home for Wayward Clocks, and the song that I listened to was Clocks by Coldplay. Every day. It took me 3 years to write that book. It was 3 years of listening to Clocks, and heaven help me when I play it in the car now, because I automatically go back into that book, and then the song will be done and I'll have no idea where I am if I've been driving. But again, Pavlov's dog. I hear the bell, I start to write. You hear the song, you start to write. It helps you get back into the land of your book very quickly and just zoom right away. You're there. I do a different song for every book. I recently had my son made me a CD of all the songs I've ever used for every book, and I'll play them in my car, which is the only place I listen to music. And now it's become a way of encouraging me. It reminds me of everything that I've done. Hey, you've written these books, you're doing pretty good. And it helps me get more enthusiastic about sitting down and getting the work done. So really, truly think about a ritual that you can do. Nothing too extreme, nothing that's going to take a half an hour, because that is going to take time for you away from writing. So something that is just very fast. Something I've started doing with the last 3 books that I've done that has helped is I have something on my desk that pertains to the book. So like my last book that was released last September was If You Tame Me, which was a novel. And believe it or not, one of the main characters in that book was a green iguana. And Gloria Steinem also featured very strongly in that book. So on my desk, I had a book by Gloria Steinem. I had the full encyclopedia of how to take care of a green iguana, and I had a statue of a green iguana. So that every day when I sat down to write, I saw that stuff. When I was writing in Grace's time, there was a lot focused around the old doll, Chatty Kathie. And I had a Christmas ornament of the old Chatty Kathie doll that actually had a string that I could pull and hear her voice. That sat on my desk during the writing of the book. The new book I'm writing now, which I'm not going to tell you what it's about because it's too weird. Right now I have on my desk the complete tales of Winnie the Pooh and a statue of Eeyore, because Eeyore features very strongly in this new book. It helps to have that visual there. And again, to get you focused on whatever thing it is you're writing about. And it's your space. You can put there whatever you want. I can be a 60-year-old woman with Eeyore on my desk, and nobody cares about it but me. So feel free to come up with stuff. Just really get into yourself and think about what is going to help me get into what I'm writing about today. All right? So let me flip my own page of notes. The next thing that you need to do in order to take yourself seriously and to be able to keep on going day after day is to have realistic expectations. There are many books out there, how-to books, called things like How to Write My Novel in a Weekend, How to Write My Novel in 6 Weeks, How to Write a Book That Will Make $1 million. We've got to pitch those aside, and you've got to get realistic. First off, if you write a novel in a weekend, you're going to have written a novel that sounds like it was written in a weekend. It's going to sound rushed. It's not going to sound complete. It's not going to sound very in-depth. In general, it takes at least 2 years to write a novel or a book-length memoir. Many take longer. I have one novel, Rise from the River, that took me, because I started and stopped and started and stopped, 20 years to write. And I think it shows it. So get rid of the idea of, I'm going to have this book done in a matter of months. Don't even say to yourself, I'm going to have this book done by the end of the year or by the end of 2021. Keep it realistic, because what if something happens, you don't quite get it done, then you're going to feel like you failed. You don't want to set things up for yourself that is going to lead you to possible failure. I really also don't like the idea of, I'm going to write 5 pages every day. Because what happens then is you're watching the page count instead of watching your words. There's a musical called You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. There's a song in it by Schrader, who was the boy who played the piano, and he's writing a book report, and it has to be so many words. And he's singing, and he's saying, this book is really, 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 really good, so that he can get his word count down. That's what you're going to start doing if you're focusing on your page count. You're going to start adding words so that you can get those pages done. So instead of having the goal of, I'm going to write something that's really good, you have the goal of, I'm going to write 5 pages. So get rid of the numbers too. We are about words. So let's just write words. Let your goal be, I'm going to write 4 times this week. So then you don't even have the goal of, I'm going to write every day. I also find that incredibly unrealistic. Most people do not have the time to write every day. I write Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. I don't write on the weekends. It's the weekend. And I don't write on Wednesdays because I teach all day long from 9 in the morning until 9 at night. So there is no time on that day. But be realistic. Most writers do not write every single day. We can't. First off, you'd burn your brain out really, really quickly. And secondly, there's this thing called life that we have to deal with. And sometimes there's days that we will not be able to sit down and write. So be as realistic as you can. I am going to sit down and I'm going to write this week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then do it so that you're not setting yourself up for failure. So now you've done it all. You have decided to start calling yourself a writer. You have set up a routine. You have a spot. You have a ritual. You are making sure that you're not setting yourself up for failure. And then you get hit with something that we like to call writer's block. Those of you who know me know that I don't believe in writer's block. And in all my years of writing, I have never had it. The reason I don't believe in writer's block is because what I think actually happens to writers is they have writer's fear, or they have writer's lack of confidence, or they just don't give their ideas a chance. You know, one of my favorite comic strips from years and years ago, back when we still worked on typewriters, showed a writer who was at his desk and he's typing, and he would maybe do 5, 6, 7 words. He'd rip out the paper, he'd crumple it up, he'd say, this is stupid, and he'd throw it on the floor. And by the end of the day, his entire room was full of crumpled up papers, and he sat back and said, I haven't gotten anything done all day. I must have writer's block. He had all of these ideas that he abandoned rather than giving them a chance. We now live in the age of the delete key, and the delete key is dangerous. You know, at least when we wrote on the typewriter, we could have always bent down, picked up one of those crumpled up pieces of paper, unfolded it, and given it another chance. When we hit delete, it's gone forever. So be very careful with your delete key. But also, I want you to start being aware of when you sit down and start to write, and you say something like, well, that's just stupid. And you set it aside, or you delete it and you go on to something else. If you say something is stupid, chances are it's actually really good. It's just something that is very, very different. So give it a chance. Your imagination is working. We are imaginative people. And so let's give it a shot. Going back to my iguana for a minute. If You Tame Me was one of those ideas that I said, oh my God, this is so stupid. I had an idea as I was nearly asleep one night. I was in bed and almost asleep, and I began to think, okay, there's this woman, and she's just turned 55. She's never been married. She wants to be married. She's always considered herself a feminist, but she's wondering if she can really be a feminist, if she feels like her life isn't complete without a man in her life. And she doesn't want to go adopt a cat, because that's cliche. So she's going to adopt an iguana. And she's going to call him Newt because when she was a kid, her favorite cookie was the Fig Newton. And she loved the cookie so much, she wanted to marry a man named Newt. But now there's no man, so she's going to have an iguana named Newt. I did not even get up to write that idea down. I was like, what did you eat before bed? That is one of the strangest things you've ever said. Just go to sleep. Luckily, when I got up the next morning, the idea was still there. And I began to write it. And it's a book. It came out in September, but I could have abandoned it. I could have just said, no one is going to want to read a book about a woman who adopts an iguana named after her favorite cookie when she was a kid. Well, yeah, there's people who want to read that. And it was a lot of fun writing it. So really start paying attention to your own language when you are working on something. And if you are abandoning something because you just think it's a dumb idea, give it another chance. I have a client in Australia who is writing a book that is based on a woman who has just lost her mom, and she's kind of at loose ends, and she starts a business detangling jewelry. You know how we all get our chains all mixed up with our necklaces and we can't get them undone? She has started a business where she goes around and she detangles chains for people. It is the craziest, most interesting book, and it's actually about grief, and that detangling ends up being a huge metaphor throughout the entire book. She didn't know that when she started, and she nearly gave up on it. And I said, please keep following that. And she did, and it's turning out to be the most amazing thing. So start working on your own language. I want to give you a moment to write for a little bit before we move on to the next thing. I want you to take out whatever it is you normally write with. Hopefully you're in a place where it's close by. So if you usually write on a pad of paper or on your laptop or whatever, please use that now. And I want you to first write a paragraph about what was the most ridiculous dream you have ever had. Write that description. And then I want you to just take a little time to start putting it into a story. Make it a character. You know, don't say I, say she or he. But first write down the description of the dream so that you remember it. It is 4:32. I'm going to give you until 4:40 to write this. So you got a few minutes. All right, is everybody back? All right, I'm going to share. Can you all hear me? Okay, it says I'm muted, but there we go. Now I've been unmuted again. To see if any of you would like to share what you wrote. Would any of you want to share?
Remember, you'll have to unmute yourself.
You'll have to unmute yourselves too. Come on, somebody be brave.
I'll be brave.
All right, Lynn, let's see what you've got.
She didn't tell too many people about this whole thing because she knew they would think she was nuts. But whenever she needed a bit of guidance or courage or just time with her mom, Zaravia would go take a nap. Now, her mother had died many years earlier in a not too painful way at the end of a wrestling match with a nasty cancer. Zaravia took care of her mother the last year she was alive, and they grew closer than Zaravia had ever thought possible. The idea of losing her was too painful, and her mother agreed. So they came up with an idea that she would come to this place that they would agree upon, an imaginary place, a lake with a cottage and a rowboat and 2 chairs. And whenever she needed to go see her mother, she just went and took a nap.
Wow.
That's as far as I got.
That's excellent. So what was your dream about?
Well, the dream, the first thing I wrote down was, of course, the most ridiculous dream I can think about is not coming to mind because I almost never remember dreams.
Oh dear.
So I was completely frozen. But I had this was my dream. And I did take care of my mother in the last year she died. This is many years ago now, 30 years ago. And she was an imaginative person. And we're both a little on the woo-woo side, and we grew very close in that year. And so she suggested that we create an imaginative meeting place and that maybe it would work. And it was, she had said that at some point in a conversation, and then at some point it became a dream that I was experiencing. So the dream was that I would go, that I went to see my mother after she died, and she had lost about 25 years. She looked great, and she was very healthy. And there was this complete, beautiful place that we went and visited in. So.
Oh, how neat. I think it makes for a really interesting beginning too. That was excellent. Very cool. All right, who else is going to be brave? I know some of you and I know where you live, so if you're not brave, I'm going to call on you. So someone be brave voluntarily. Yeah, Cheryl.
Okay, this is going to be strange because
Good.
mainly because since the pandemic began, it's been a very quiet, fallow, restful time for me. And so for it, like in my whole life, this has been a period when I have not been drawn to write. Very strange. So this is actually the first, oops, let me get my phone. This is actually the first like writing I've done other than, you know, responding to emails and doing things like that. So it's, okay, here it is. There I was, checking out at Lamb's with bananas and unsweetened almond milk. And there he was, behind plexiglass in the cash register. He didn't need a mask. His entire face, nose and mouth and eyes and all, was wrapped like a modern mummy's in strip after strip of blue plastic wrap. Silence.
Whoa, okay. That's another intriguing beginning. And I certainly hope you follow up with that because I want to know what's up with this guy who's wrapped up. Very cool, Cheryl. Good job. Anybody else? Go ahead, Sue. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
I don't remember my dreams either. So she didn't remember her dreams and dreaded always being asked by her partner each morning what she dreamt during the night. And so she developed a way to use her computer skills to hack into the subconscious of those around her who had newly implanted devices to improve their memories. She'd weave her way past the cerebral structures that stored their memories and into those that were their dreamscapes. In that way, she had an answer to her partner's questions and a keen insight into those around her near and far. It also made her wonder if there was something wrong with her brain. Was it impossible for her to imagine, or just a malfunction in her recall?
Oh, that is really cool too. And the idea of being able to recreate dreams that way. You know, I never once thought about when I was getting ready to do this that I might have people who don't dream. And yet I know there's people who don't dream or who at least don't remember their dreams. So you're reminding me of that if I do this again, that I have to figure in for that. But how neat. And do you do that, Sue? Do you find a way to create dreams for people or?
No, I just don't remember my dreams. My husband has wonderful dreams that I could maybe borrow his, but I don't remember mine.
Wow. And I dream very vividly. And in fact, sometimes it's more exhausting to sleep than it is to stay awake because the dreams are so vivid. And, you know, my husband Michael is in the class here now too, and he and I tend to wake up talking to each other without knowing whatever the hell it is we're talking about because we're both talking in our sleep. But we've had some pretty in-depth conversations. All right, anybody else? I want one more before we move on. Oh, you guys. Rhea, I'm gonna pick on you because I know what your fiction is like. So I can't even begin to imagine what your dreams are like.
My dreams are pretty vivid. I have some crazy
all
ones.
right, so let's see what you got.
So I didn't really start writing. I did more fleshing out of what I wanted to write, kind of.
That's fine.
Weird. I had a dream once and it was really, really vivid, and it involved a mermaid, but it was a ghost mermaid in a swimming pool for some odd reason. I don't know why. Don't remember much more than that. I just remember it was very vivid. So I decided that I needed a story around a ghost mermaid who had some sort of unfinished business, or she had found an object and was trying to track down its owner. And she'd somehow ended up in this neighborhood pool. And the person who discovered her is an agoraphobic musician who would swim at night when no one else was around. She was able to leave, a little bit. And slowly, the mermaid apparently can leave water as a ghost, but is less substantial. And when it goes in the water, it's much more substantial. But had been spying on all the different homes and getting secrets and stories and discussing them with this main character who would go swimming at night, the musician who would swim at night, who wrote jingles for her brother's company, who produced something that was really popular and timely and like a household name kind of thing. And she writes the jingles for them. So that's how she makes her living, but she's stuck at home. And anyway, that's kind of as far as I got.
I love it. I love it. And again, there is a great example of just letting the ideas in. She's writing about swimming pools and mermaids, and suddenly there's a guy who writes jingles, and we're not weeding any of it out. We're just trying to bring it all in and see if it works. In a few weeks, I'm teaching a class. It's actually a live class in Fountain City, Wisconsin, which is near Winona, Minnesota. And the class is set at an outdoor labyrinth. And I teach the creative process and how to use it with the labyrinth. And part of that is people, as they're walking on the labyrinth and winding their way in, just letting all of the ideas come. and writing them down as they walk, you know, and then we get to the center and we think about it for a while, and then they choose one and we wind our way out. But that's just, my gosh, Ray, I think if you were walking that labyrinth, I'd probably have to give you 4 notebooks to be able to fit in everything that you allow in. And that's exactly right, you know, that we do allow these thoughts to come in, and they end up being really wonderful stories. I wrote a short story once about a woman who used her lunch hours to go around downtown Milwaukee finding dead birds, and she picks them up and she saves them under her desk and she brings them home to bury them. Now again, why? You know, I just had that idea and I could have said, this is really strange. What are you doing this for? But I followed it, and it ended up being a really wonderful story that got published and republished and is now in a book. So one of our jobs as writers is to learn to edit and to edit ourselves. But it is possible to take that editing too far in the creative part of it if you are already beginning to edit yourself before you even start to write. So let these ideas hit you and just keep writing them and see what happens. I mean, you might end up with a pretty quirky story, but there's nothing wrong with quirky stories. They're an awful lot of fun, actually. So, all right, does anyone else want to share before I move on? None of you are leaping up. All right. So let's talk about now, if you have gotten yourself through to be able to handle the everyday, you are managing most of the time to sit down and get your writing done when you want to, you have a place to do it, you have a routine that you follow, you've got little things on your desk to help you through, and then something big happens. You know, something big like this, like COVID, where everything really seems to change overnight. We have gone through such a massive change in this country and in this world since March that we are all having to deal with. Some of us are working at home when we used to work outside of the home. Some of us are still going out to work and are being scared while we're out there because we're wondering, what are we being exposed to? Some of us have lost our jobs. Some of us are worried we're going to lose our jobs. We're all worried about getting COVID. And I mean, I think I had like 3 people this week who ended up going to the doctors because they had colds. And yet, of course, the first fear is this COVID? And my husband right now has pink eye. And I brought him into urgent care yesterday. And of course, our first question was, is this COVID? Because one of the multi-billion symptoms of COVID is you get red eyes. And the doctor said, one symptom does not COVID make. And I was like, I think that's something we all need to embrace, and we need to realize that there's other sicknesses out there. But either way, it has infiltrated our lives. We also have been dealing with great political unrest. It doesn't matter how far removed you are, if you're keeping yourself from watching the news, you can't help but feel it. You know, it is out there, and it does feel like all we have to do is turn on our computer or our TV and we are bombarded with bad news. And it's getting kind of hard to handle for some of us. And again, writers are sensitive people. So I believe, and it might sound a little bit, oh, I don't even know what the word is. It might say I'm being preferential to writers, but I do think that we sometimes have a harder time weeding things out, because one of the hallmarks of being a writer is empathy and being able to get ourselves into other people's lives and other people's situations, which means we live an awful lot of lives in our lifetime. And so we feel this, we feel everything that's going on. So what do we do when everything is falling down and we're trying to find a sense of normalcy? Well, first off, one thing you can do, quite simply, is to continue doing what you have just learned to do. You keep going to that spot. You keep doing your routine. You keep writing so that you have one place of normalcy every day that you go to, which is your writing. If you are a fiction writer, one thing you can do, of course, is to write about anything but COVID. You can lose yourself in your own world. This is a time actually when I really envy fantasy writers, because they can go off entirely into their own worlds and not be involved in this one. I have people asking me already, should they be writing stories now where all of their characters are wearing masks? You know, should they be writing as today's norm? And my response right now is no. You know, let's keep writing as if we're going to go back to a normal situation. But, you know, maybe we will have to start incorporating masks into our stories. I don't know at this point. But if you can write and escape, you can do that, you know, and get in there. The other thing to think about is to write about it, to write about what is going on. Sometimes just getting it down on paper makes it feel a little bit more controllable. We can control our words. We can control what our pages look like. And so sometimes just getting that out will help. There have been any number of magazines and anthologies who are looking for COVID-related material right now, because that is what a lot of people are writing about, and it does help a little bit. I wanted to share with you one thing that I wrote during this time, and I deliberately try not to write about it. I want to be away from it. But I found when we were still dealing with COVID, and George Floyd happened, I was just so overwhelmed with the world that I wasn't sure even what to do anymore. And so I wrote a poem, which I'm going to read to you really quickly because it's short. And just to show you how you can take what is happening around you and put it into your work. This is called Again. In the middle of a pandemic, a great equalizer, we're all in this together. A white police officer kneels on the throat of a black man. We can't breathe, gasped the COVID victims. I can't breathe, gasped the black man. They die, he dies. Protests for civic rights, for civil rights. And we learn again, remember Ferguson? Again, remember Little Rock? Again, remember Greensboro? Again, remember Selma to Montgomery? Again, that equality is still a dream, even in a pandemic. We're not all in this together. Hands up, don't shoot. I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. To be able to write that helped. And I can't tell you how. It was just a way of getting it out and saying out loud the things that I was thinking. You know, and so if that is going to help you, do it. You know, it might be turmoil, it might be feeling like you're poking at an open wound, but it does end up being healing. You know, it ends up helping you get through this. So give it a shot. You know, if there's something that you really want to write about, whether it's COVID, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's the changing climate, which we are certainly experiencing this year, you know, feel free to start trying to do that. It's been a nutty time, and I can't imagine that there's anybody out there who hasn't been affected by this. You know, for me personally, between COVID and everybody in my family, except for me as an essential worker, so everyone is still out there in this. Going on to my daughter, who is a math professor in Louisiana and just faced down Hurricane Laura and had another hurricane heading her way. And, you know, it does, and my daughter is also married to a Black man, and she is absolutely terrified to let him go anywhere without her, which means I am terrified for her that she's going to witness something that no person should ever witness. So barraged, you know, and so are you, so is everybody. Sometimes what this means too is that you need to cut yourself some slack and give yourself a break. If you find yourself sitting down at the computer or your notebook or wherever it is that you write, and you honestly, truly get the blank stares, you just can't do anything, let it rest, and don't write. But focus it kind of like how I'm having you do it with writing. Give it a specific day. I am going to take a break from this, from writing, for 1 week, so that you have a date in mind as to when you're going to return. The mind is an amazing thing, and it will take that week and it'll say, okay, I have this week to rest up, and then I'm going to be back at work again. And you will be amazed when you sit back down that you are able to start up again. So don't feel like, if I am not actively writing, I am not a writer. Of course you are. Writers take breaks, just like we all take breaks. So if you need to, do it. Also, if you need to, shut off the news for a while. I've had to take a total break from the news for the last couple weeks. And I will glance at the headline, so at least I feel like I'm sort of caught up in what's happening, but I had to remove myself from it for a while in order to be able to keep on going. So feel free. So what I want you to do right now, and yes, it's going to be a big ask. This is going to require a lot from you. I want you for the next 5 minutes to either choose to write something about what is going on in our world now, or to start writing something that has absolutely nothing to do with anything that's going on out there. Okay, it is 5:01. I will give you until, I'm going to say 5:10. Let's go 5:10, give you 10 minutes to be able to do this. So either write about what is going on right now, or write something that is totally and completely different. You have 1 more minute. All right, come on back. So I'm not going to have you guys share these ones, but I would like to know, with a show of hands, how many of you chose to write about the things that are happening in the world right now? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I think 4. And how many of you chose to write about something completely different? 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a few of you who aren't raising your hands. So good. It's about a split group. And again, this is the way to deal with things. So, and it's a way to keep yourselves going. What I'd like to do now is if we can unmute everybody again. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, they can. Can we get people unmuted?
They're all able to unmute themselves.
Kathie, I think you're muted.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Trust me, that's hard to do.
Shut up.
Michael and I had the same thought.
All right, so does anybody have any questions they would like to ask? It can be about anything. It can be about specifically about something that you're writing, or about the writing process, or about this topic. Yeah, Rhea, your hand's up.
Where do you write?
Where do I write? I write, this is the first floor. I'm currently in the studio right now. This is a 3-story live where you work condo. So the first floor is the business, and we live on the 2nd and 3rd floors upstairs, and I have my own writing space on the 3rd floor. So, and in fact, Rhea, you're in the Monday night online nonfiction fiction workshop. When I teach you guys, I'm in my office. What you see behind me there is my writing space.
Cool.
So
it's a good space.
I have, one of my favorite things in there is I write on, it's a teacher's table from the 1800s, and originally came from England. Obviously I didn't get it from England, but to me it was it's very, very long, and it has drawers on the short ends that open up and slide in. So the drawers take up the whole space of the table. And when I found it when I was opening the studio, and I thought, what a neat way of combining my life. I'm writing on it, but it's a teacher's table, and I'm also a teacher. So, other questions? Yeah, Chad.
More of a comment, really. I liked what you said about writing you have a song for each book that you're working on. When I've written, which isn't as much these days, I find it hard to write in complete silence. I need some kind of at least ambient music, maybe some light jazz or something like that. Not only to kind of help me relax, but it also, it's a distraction that forces me to focus on what I'm working on. Like intentionally blocking something out in a weird way helps me focus on what I need to focus on. So I don't know if anybody else has that same experience or approaches it that same way.
It's, writers are a mix, and I have some people that do always need something on, either music, or some of them will even put TV on in the background just to have that little bit of noise going on while they're working, and others need silence. And so when we used to have creative writing camps here for kids, And I would let them, when it was free time for their writing, they could bring in their music, but they had to have headphones so that it wouldn't affect the people who needed silence. So it's good that you know exactly what it is you need. And I used to put into practice, I don't do it so much anymore, and now I can't. Every Friday when I wrote, I would go to a Starbucks. And the Starbucks that I used to go to had a fireplace in it. And I would set up, people didn't like me very much, I would set my little table up directly in front of the fireplace. And I would have my chair so that my back was to everything going on in the cafe. But I was very, very aware of people and noise. And it made me, it shifted my own perspective on what I was doing. It was almost like I was writing with the feeling of somebody was looking over my shoulder, to help me think about what is the reader going to think when they're looking at this. And luckily that particular Starbucks was very tolerant of me. I acknowledged them when my first book came out, because so much of it was written in the cafe, and so they had it on display. But it is a neat thing to get out and write in a public place too, just to give you a little bit of a different feel and an awareness of the reader.
I do write at our health club in the lobby when I'm waiting for Bill, and that's my normal spot to write. That's where most of my book was written. And someone asked me about that just recently. How can you write there? And I'm like, well, most of the time people kind of leave me alone, but we, start talking, or we start talking about what I'm writing, and that kind of gets other people enthused and so then they ask. So yeah, it seems like I'm out of sync if we don't go to the health club that weekend and I don't have my writing done. So yeah, I get what you're saying about needing noise.
Yeah, noise, and sometimes just people, having other people around. Other questions? Yeah, Lynn.
Not really a question, it's more, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, let's do Lynn first.
Okay, really quickly. I have had a couple of short stories published and nonfiction published, but I've never yet published a book, and I'm right now working, as you know, on a long piece, on a book, and it's fiction. And I've given myself
book. I heard that hesitation. I'm working on a long piece. Let's call it a book.
Yeah. Okay, so I have scheduled I've given myself permission to do this finally, 1,000 years later than I should have probably. But what are some good responses when people ask what I'm doing? And I've got 1,000 things I'm doing, of course, but my major, like my work focus now, is this book. And I don't want to go into what are you working on? What are you doing? Well, I've got a writing project, is what I usually say. And then people jump in and will say, do you have an editor? Have you been published? Do you have an agent? What's it about? And I don't want to offend, but I also don't want to talk it out. And of course I don't have an agent or a publisher. I should be so lucky. I'm hoping to God that it gets published one day. But so, what are some good responses when you haven't had a dozen books published about how to politely deal with this kind of a question?
Well, when you're asked what you're doing, you can say, I'm currently writing a book. If they say, what is it about? You can simply say, I'm not comfortable yet talking about this while I'm in the process of creating it. And so they should back off then. If they ask if you have an editor, yes, you do. You have me. So that is technically having an editor. If they start talking about agents and publishers, just say that's down the road. I'm not there yet. And I mean, you can't be expected to have a publisher before the book is done.
I know. People are strange about that. They expect you to have a series already, on the shelf, and I don't.
Right,
you know?
right. And that's all right. I mean, you can always say, you said you've had some short pieces published, and so you can say that if you'd like. I've had some short pieces published, but I'm still writing this one, and so I don't have a publisher yet.
Okay, thank you.
So, and when it comes to an agent, I mean, the majority of the writers these days don't have agents anymore. So many of us have gone to the small presses where agents are not required. And so many of us don't have them. I've had 4 agents and I work totally on my own now. So just answer what you're comfortable with and be honest about it. You know, I hate if somebody says to me, what are you working on right now? And if I happen to be between projects, I feel like I must be a slacker or something. And so it is very hard to say I'm between projects for me. So, but learn to just, that's one way of teaching the public just how it is that we work, is by letting them know this is what I'm doing. So get comfortable. You are writing a book. It will be published.
Thank you.
Just give it time. Rhea, what were you going to ask? No, not? Okay. What else? Anyone else have questions?
I have another one if no one else does.
Well, let's do Chad and then we'll do Cheryl.
Oh, okay. Just real quick, what are your thoughts on initiatives like National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo? Is it a good thing to try and spur people? Is it kind of pointless? Or, you know, what's your thought on something like that, like initiatives like that, that force people to just drop everything and write as much as they can?
NaNoWriMo has changed over the years, and it's become a little bit more palatable to me. Originally, when NaNoWriMo came out, it was National Write a Book in a Month. And what would happen, it was in November, and by December, I would be besieged with people saying, I've written a book in NaNoWriMo, can you help me get it published? No, I can't, because you have to rewrite it. And you have to rewrite it again. They've kind of dialed back on you're going to be able to write a complete book in a month. Instead, it's more of a way to get you focused, to get you going, to get you committed. I still don't like that they want you to write so many words a day. Again, as soon as you don't write that many words, you failed. And it's very hard to pick yourself up from that. I would prefer that they would get a little bit looser and say, let's sit down every day for a month and get some writing done. I could handle that. I still wouldn't like the every day, but at least it's just a month and then we can go back to real life. But I can't even remember anymore what they expect you to write every day, but it is some huge number.
I'd say like 1,000 words maybe, or maybe even more than that. I don't know.
It's more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they should drop the novel and just go to National Writing Month.
It's 50,000. It's 50,000 words in a month, and it ends up being about 6,000 a day. I've done it about 8 times. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So I would love it to be National Start Writing a Book in a Month, you know, so that you at least work towards having that first chapter done or the first 2 chapters done, just to make it a little bit more realistic. But I mean, anything that encourages people to write, I support, you know, and get them out there and get them going. So, I mean, there's also, and I've participated in it, April is National Poetry Month. And I know some people try to write a poem a day. And that can be a challenge too if you put a lot of work into your poetry. There is actually a short story month, but most people don't pay much attention to it. They should. I love the short story. But I like it because it encourages people to write. I just don't want them to have unrealistic expectations. Cheryl, you had a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a quick one, Kathie. What are you reading right now just for enjoyment, just because you want to?
I just started a book this week, and I'm not going to remember the name of the author just because I just started it, but it's called Parakeet. And it is a novel. I was attracted to it because, again, the book about the iguana also had 5 parakeets in it. And I'm like, oh my God, somebody else is out there writing about parakeets. So this is called Parakeet, and it is about a woman who is a week away from getting married, and this parakeet flies into her room. She's staying in the inn where she's going to be honeymooning, and she realizes that this parakeet is the ghost of her grandmother, who is dead set against the wedding. And the parakeet promptly poops all over her wedding dress. That's as far as I've gotten, and I'm just enamored with it. You know, it is a weird and wonderful book. I tend to write or read literary fiction. I just got Sue Miller put out her first book in like 20 years, and I just bought that. It's on my to-read list. So I love to read. I only have time to read during lunch. So that's why there's always a book at the table that's waiting for me. But that's what I'm reading right now. What else? Any other questions? We got 5 minutes left. I don't see anybody. Come on, somebody ask a question. Sue.
It's not really a question, it's just kind of a comment. Coursera has this course on learning how to learn, and it's free, and I just started kind of taking it, and a lot of what what you were talking about today correlate with that course. Like the idea about focus, and they had a technique that a lot of times people have a difficulty getting started. And the idea of like, there's different types of learning. There's focused and diffuse, and depending on what type of learning you're doing, when you're learning something new, it's more like diffuse, and you need a lot of kind of time and to have your imagination go work. And focus is when you're doing something that you've had a lot of experience with, and then that's more concentrated. And they talked about like trying to get started, and the technique of like setting a timer and just kind of getting yourself over the hump like for 25 minutes and then giving yourself a break. So it's interesting how like what your guidance like really corresponds with a lot of brain science and that. So thank you so much.
I'm glad. Yeah, and again, you know, I feel like the public notion of what we do is so different than what we actually do. And so when people do sit down to write, they're kind of disappointed at first if the muse doesn't hit. And sometimes even when you do get an amazing idea, an idea that you just can't wait to get to the computer to write, and you sit down and you start writing it, and 5 pages in, you suddenly fizzle. And then you think, oh my gosh, I guess this wasn't a good idea at all. Well, no, it's just your brain needs time to recharge and get it going and see what happens next. You know, for those of us who are fiction writers, and for some reason, we've been talking about this a lot this week with my clients and classes. We actually begin to think of our characters as real people, and we talk about them as if they're real people, and it gets kind of scary sometimes. But I have somebody in my Wednesday afternoon group she just out of nowhere started writing a book. She had no interest in writing whatsoever until she got this idea. And now she's whipping. I mean, she has already produced close to 50 pages, and it's good. And she was talking in class and began talking about how her character, Leveda, she went walking off somewhere, and so my student followed after her, and I'm like, oh, you've got the fiction bug bad. You know, you're following your character. You do know it's in your head, right? Yes, I know it's in my head, but we do, you know, and that's, again, part of the experience is that we live with these people that we write about, and they become very real to us. As long as they aren't telling us to do dangerous things, that's perfectly fine. Anything else? We're down to the last 2 minutes. Please know that I will be back again tomorrow. I will be presenting, this is my new book. This is, no matter which way you look, there's more to see. It's a full-length poetry collection, which is why it's so skinny, because it's poetry. But it was just released this week. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about how did this book come about with a writer who is known primarily for her fiction. and I'll be reading to you from the book as well.
We're looking forward to it. Thank you for sharing your insights and your knowledge with us today. And yeah, we're looking forward to hearing some of your own work tomorrow morning as well. So I think, well, yeah, excuse me, we'll call it good on that note. Did put up some links in the chat. If you're interested or willing to give us a little feedback on our festival, there's a link for that. And also a link for the schedule for the rest of the festival. Yeah, we'll say goodbye then. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you very much, Kathie. Really, really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
You're welcome. All right, have a good day.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Everybody. Take care.